Thank you so much for tuning into the first episode of the Andy Dare Show. I'm your host, Andy Dare, and I'm going to be bringing you a quick weekly show about the music industry, giving you top 5 lists of all sorts of different ranges and themes, giving you album reviews, and letting you know what's hot in the area of music right now as we speak. As always, you can find me on Facebook. You can get a lot of exclusive content on there. You can follow me at Andy Dare. That's ANDYDERER. And for this show, you can find it at theandydarershow.podbean.com. All right, so this is going to be a weekly show where we break down a top 5 of a different theme weekly. And for the rest of them, I'm going to try to get guests and try to get the guys from Fleetcast in first, have them get their first helping, and then I'm going to definitely look outside for other people and checking, the Twitters, whatever you tell me. If I like it, I will say it on the air, and that'll be a fun little game there. But anyways, this episode and all the episodes of the Andy Dare Show are brought to you in part by Fleetcast. This is a podcast I've been contributing to and have co-created, for the last year in Chicago. We record at the Music Garage in the West Loop, and it's basically a musical-themed comedy show where there's a lot of variety involved, a lot of guests, lots of interviews, lots of jokes going around, funny bits, a lot of pranks and stuff like that. So if you're into humor, if you're into comedy, and you're looking for something that's actually from the city you're from, of Chicago, then definitely check it out. It's very Chicago-centric, a lot of Chicago accents going on, a lot of funny call-in bits, too. Last year, we got to interview a bunch of cool people, such as the rapper Copyright, Adam Carolla's superfan Giovanni Giorgio, and we just actually had the privilege of speaking with an awesome recording engineer who's worked on many huge projects. That's Steve Albini at his studio called Electrical Audio. So definitely check that one out. That was a 301. So you can find the Fleetcast over at our Podbean page, and that is just thefleecast.podbean.com. They also just set up a YouTube. It's youtube.com/fleavids, VIDS. And you can follow them at Fleetcast. All right, so let's get into this episode. The theme for this episode I thought would be something that's near and dear to my heart. That's the top 5 albums of the 1990s. So being 11 years outside of the decade, it's really shown a light on what albums are really important to me and enduring, that have stayed enduring for the last 11 years. And thought I'd give you my number 5 first, and that is a very important album for the alternative rock / emo scene. I don't like calling it emo because I'm not a big fan of emo, but it's definitely an emotional record. It's Weezer, a.k.a. the Blue Album. Came out in 1994 on DGC Records. What's to say about this album? I mean, it's a very classic-sounding record produced by Rick Ocasek. Has countless of Weezer classics. A lot of people say that they've never really been able to achieve this sound again. And, it ranges from bubblegum pop to catchy, like, new wave sounding rock. It definitely picked the 90s up out of the grungy, depressive sound and gave it more of a upbeat sound. And, I think there's 4 or 5 hit singles off it. Definitely spawned a lot of careers of imitators that can't quite pull out the originality that Weezer had, which a lot can owe to the lead singer Rivers Cuomo, who's quite an eccentric, a lot of people call him a genius songwriter, and this is where it all started. And if you have not heard it, please go do yourself a favor and check out Weezer. All right, number 4, I've got another big album. Came out in 1997 on Capitol Records. This is Radiohead, OK Computer. And when this first came out, it definitely shocked a lot of people. They had moved away from their strictly guitar-oriented sound and were starting to experiment with all sorts of different sounds. Definitely creating a near-concept record, kind of about, a dark new millennium that people are definitely disconnected to each other. And it was kind of a precursor to the big internet craze and all that sort of stuff. It was back in 97, so this was just beginning now. And singer Tom York and company definitely created a song cycle for the ages. I knew as soon as I put it on in 1997 that this would be something that I would go back to year after year, keep finding new things to listen to, new things that are deep in the mix. And at this point, Radiohead were pretty much peerless as far as creating something so complex and original that they would actually never achieve this guitar-based sound again. They would keep on going further and further to the left of the dial, and definitely coming up with even stranger and more alien soundscapes as the years went on. But this was definitely when they still had their strongest set of songs, their strongest sound, at least in my opinion. And it spread like wildfire. It was very popular, even though it was kind of a strange, concept album. It definitely garnered a huge amount of new fans for the group, and which they are still getting to this day. So check it out. It's Radiohead OK Computer, 1997. All right, well, if you've gone by my website, theandydareshow.podbean.com, you're going to get a lot of videos, a lot of info, a lot of stuff about me. I got a couple new videos up. One is featuring my old band Pencap Chew in 1996. It's a little clip from the full-length video that we're going to be putting out for a 15th year anniversary. It was me and two other guys that I grew up with, and it's just kind of funny hearing this cover band that I was part of, that I was singing for. We didn't do too bad for 11-year-olds, so go check it out. It's on the website right now, and if you haven't already, go check the other videos out there. A lot of stuff dealing with restaurants, a lot of stuff dealing with music, comedy, all sorts of stuff. So that is the andydareshow.podbean.com. Well, back with the list, we're going to number 3. This is Beck, Odelay from 1996. It was released once again on DGC. And, wow, this album was very important for me. Took the sound of rock and it put it in a blender with a bunch of different other styles and influences. Showed that indie rock was going to be the new mainstream, at least for me, because he used like a junkyard style sound where he would throw anything in, would take weird obscure samples with him and his production team of the Dust Brothers, and they created a sound unlike any other, which leaned as much on old school hip-hop as it did on folk, as it did on even hillbilly country music, to psychedelic rock, to all sorts of stuff. And it just came out sounding like America, kind of. I don't know, it sounds corny, but it came out sounding like a very important piece of history, at least. And Odelay is the point when Beck was no longer this weird eccentric kid that where people were talking about and hyping up. He had graduated into his own, graduated into definitely one of the voices of the decade of the 90s, and he was so young at this point, but he definitely had a grasp on styles and influences that were way before even his time. And I think that's something missing from today's music, where these guys in the 90s would actually be very knowledgeable about past styles, past trends in music, past influences, and now I think people have kind of foregone that, and they just think if they know what's big now, then they know what's big. And it definitely pays to know your history, definitely pays to know what came before, because this is something that Beck definitely had a firm grasp on, and it's definitely evident all the way throughout Odelay. So definitely check out Beck, Odelay. Brings us to number 2. Huge tour de force. Once again, a concept album, double disc. I heard it once called If Steven Spielberg Got a Hold of Punk, what it would sound like. This is Smashing Pumpkins with Melancholy in the Infinite Sadness. It was released in 1995 on Virgin Records. And this would probably be my number 1 if it wasn't for what the number 1 is. This is just so important to a young Andy. From the first single, Bullet with Butterfly Wings, all the way through the 5th single, 33 it was called. They definitely made an epic, and this was at a time when making an epic rock album was kind of cliche, or passé, I guess is the word. it's kind of uncool to want to like strive for huge success and arena rock success at this point. And Billy Corgan and company didn't really care about that. They wanted to, try to hit it over the fences, and they did. And this is a very important third album, pivotal. If they would have bombed on this one, I think they would have been done. But they definitely opened up a whole world of possibilities for their sound. Took it in each direction. They took it in like getting even louder, getting even more like metal tinged, and then they went to an even more extreme direction of quiet, beautiful like folk melodies, and there's a whole bunch of stuff in the middle too. Bunch of 90s pop rock that it will be enduring for the years to come, obviously. And spawned 5 hit singles, spawned even a box set. Many important videos were cut during this time, and this is when videos really meant something to MTV. They were valued very importantly by the young generation, and hit songs like 1979, Zero. I like numbers a lot on this album, I guess. But Blue with Butterfly Wings, whole bunch of good stuff. Songs that aren't played on the radio that are better than most people's singles, So this album is very near and dear to my heart, so do check it out. This is back when they had the original lineup, the original sound. They were on the cutting edge for sure. 1995, The Smashing Pumpkins, Melancholy, Infinite Sadness. All right, well, I was talking about Fleetcast earlier, and I'd like to explain a little bit about what we're about. This is a music-centric comedy podcast for the Chicago Nation. And when I say Chicago Nation, I say because really Chicagoans will find the most to get out of it. It's very Chicago-centric and themed, but it's also for the world in that there's a lot of universal things that are in Chicago that people definitely cherish throughout the world. So I think you don't have to be from Chicago to really get the joke of the Fleetcast. And it features myself, Drew Trilla, Ryan Trembath, and producer Adam. We record a weekly podcast, a lot of guests, a lot of interviews. Last year we got the chance to interview rapper Copyright, superfan Giovanni Giorgio. This year we've already spoken with legendary recording artist and recording engineer Steve Albini. So do check out the Fleetcast if you like music, if you like comedy, if you like sports, if you like jokes. This is a place to find it all. And it all intersects at thefleetcast.podbean.com. You can download the newest and I think the last 10 episodes also on iTunes. They're all free, so go sync them up to your iPod or whatever, your drone or droid or whatever. And you could do that. You can follow at the Fleetcast. There's a YouTube page full of funny little clips called you can find that at youtube.com/fleavids. And that's basically what all this podcast is brought to you by the Fleetcast. This is just a quick little thing in between the shows that I just thought I'd do to help work on my style of speaking and just try to sharpen up a little bit so that I can come to the Fleetcast totally motivated and totally ready to rock. So I wouldn't call this practice, but I'd call it definitely in the warm-up circle, swinging a bat with a donut around it. All right, so that brings us to our number one album of the 1990s. If you don't agree with me, then I don't know what decade you were listening to music in, but it's NirvanaNevermind, 1991, DGC Records. What can you say about the album? I know I said it a lot, but what can you say about Nevermind? This is the album of a generation. This had, every song was a hit. Every song was tightly created. This was made during an obviously inspiring time for Kurt Cobain, Chris Novoselic, and Dave Grohl. They didn't want to be spokesmen for a generation, but they were, and it didn't sound like anything created in the last 10 years in the 80s. It was even rougher than most of the stuff that came out in the 70s. But it wasn't hippy-dippy or flower power like the stuff from the 60s. It was completely different. Self-lacerating, darkly humorous, but very lyrical and still kind of a clarity of sound created with help by producer Butch Vig. And every song is iconic. Every song is important. Go check it out. If you haven't, I don't know where you've been living in the last decade, last 20 years, but NirvanaNevermind. That's the number one album of the 1990s. And that goes from 1990 to 1999. Number one album, NirvanaNevermind. If you disagree with me, you can hit me up on Twitter. I am at Andy Dare. That's ANDYDERER. You can hit me up on Facebook. You could do both of those things. And for more of this show, you can find it at theandydarershow.podbean.com. Once again, the show is sponsored in part by the Fleetcast. Go check us out. And thank you so much for listening. This is the first episode of The Andy Darer Show.